Welcome to this screencast on the Graphics Digital Planning tool. This screencast will outline how to fill out the digital planner and how the document functions. The unit of learning being outlined is a unit of learning which would link to the 2D Conventions unit as seen in the Graphics PLE 2018-2019 workshop. Please note the following. The JCT4 team have developed a digital planning tool following the same planning approach used in the Cluster Day workshop. This version is not to be taken as a standalone document, but to be used with the planning tool to provide a plan for a unit of learning. It is important to note that this is a suggested approach to the planning process and that other approaches can be taken. Here is the graphics planning tool we are going to be using in the planning process. On one side of the page, the 37 learning outcomes, action verbs, strand and element descriptors, as well as Appendix A of the specification can be found. On the other side of the page, the suggested planning approach as seen in the Graphics PLE 2018-2019 workshop can be found. The digital planner emulates these same steps in a digital format. Before we start working with the digital planner, let's look at where they can be found on the JCT website. Go to the home page and select the Technologies tile. Next you select Planning, and finally you select the subject, which is Graphics. Here you will find both the planning tool and the digital planner. This is the Graphics Digital Planning tool. It is an A3 Word document, and as outlined earlier, it copies the same planning approach as seen on the back of the graphics planner. The document contains editable text boxes, drop-down menu containing the action verbs and learning outcomes, as well as image blocks. As we work through the unit of learning, we will see how the document functions. This section of the planner can be customized by the teacher. This unit is looking at 3D representations. Remember that Appendix A on the planning tool is used to clarify this term. 3D representation is a view which displays a physical object or an abstract concept in a form which reflects length, depth, and height. Information such as duration, start time, and class group can be filled in here. We start off with student context, looking at age and stage, prior learning, and a broad focus for the unit. This unit was designed for a certain class group, and we have taken into account their specific needs. Identifying your student context determines how a unit will be designed to best suit your class group. Age and stage is first year students in the end of term 1. Prior learning is basics of shapes, sketching using square grid paper, use of the drawing equipment, basic modeling in CAD, including the sketch and extrude commands. The focus of learning is 3D representations, CAD of basic solids, moving on from prisms and rendering. Finally, we explore both the strands and elements. A starting point here is the 3D strand and the element of communicating. Here you use the planning tool to consider the learning outcomes to engage with in the unit. The image added using the image block highlights the exploration stage with the learning outcomes and post-its. Finally, outline the chosen learning outcomes using the drop-down menus as shown. A tip here is to color code the chosen learning outcomes per strand, as this will give a good indication of the spread of learning outcomes across the strands at a glance. This next step identifies what the student will be learning. Having identified the learning outcomes, now it's time to outline the key learning. The numbers in this section refer to the learning outcomes found in the planning tool, and the writing after the numbers relate to the key learning that is being engaged with in those learning outcomes. An example in this plan is learning outcome 3.9. Apply a variety of rendering and presentation techniques to enhance the communication of solutions. The key learning within this learning outcome is shading and rendering to ground objects that are sketched and drawn. Another example is 3.7. Use computer-aided graphics to communicate design solutions effectively. And the key learning associated with this learning outcome is use CAG to create 3D objects, introducing the cut extrude feature. Next step is to outline the action verbs associated with the learning outcomes as seen by the drop-down menus. Action verbs help direct learning and assessment. It is important here to look at your key learning to ensure it is consistent with the definition of the action verbs associated with the learning outcomes. This next step looks at developing ideas for how students could experience this learning and how will I know they are learning. How students could experience learning is by sketching, using drawing equipment, and using CAG, in this case SolidWorks. The next part is how will I know they are learning, which is ongoing assessment. Here the number indicates the learning outcome, as seen in the previous section, and the writing indicates how these learning outcomes are being assessed. This next step looks at how you will do this unit in the classroom, the resources, methodologies, outline what you need to do the unit, and what approach you are taking for the unit. How will students experience the learning outcomes, what the learning experience is when engaging with the learning outcomes. As seen in this unit plan, this section is structured that it also gives the sequence of the unit and how it might flow. Similar to the previous sections, the numbers indicate the learning outcomes and the writing relates to what the students will be doing. 1.9 2.2 Analyze oblique solutions and recreate using grid paper, then moves on to the next point, 1.9 2.8, where students will recreate these sketch solutions using drawing equipment and correct graphical conventions, which in oblique is the angle of 45 degrees. And then this moves on to 3.9 with the application of shading to ground objects, and so on. This unit highlights the integrated approach of graphics by developing sketching, board drawing, and CAD skills seamlessly in the same unit. On the right of the document, you will find image blocks. Images can be added here to act as a visual cue to what the unit is about. Or alternatively, they can be deleted out and printed as a blank space for sketching or more writing. In this unit, I have added images to act as a visual cue to help remind me what the unit entails at a glance. At the bottom of the page, you will find the reflection section. You can fill out points to note when you begin planning, reflection points as you are planning, and reflection on how the unit went once you have ran it in the classroom. Reflection is an integral part of the improvement process and turns a plan into a living document. This brings us to the end of the screencast. I hope you found it helpful. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at JCT4Ed for any updates. Thank you.